Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a deep dive into Orris and Iris in fragrances. They can go very many different ways and you'll see that in this video. Iris and Orris is one of my favorite notes in perfumery. So I have 10 different fragrances here that utilize the Orris or Iris in different ways. I have 4 designers, 4 niche, and 2 dupes on this list. So let's start with the dupes and work our way up to the niche. First up is from the house of Lattafa, and this is Liam, originally titled Liam Grey. And this is a clone of BDK's Gris Charnel. I love Orris and Iris in perfumery because it can go so many different ways, including soapy, dry, chalky, powdery, or even carroty. Liam Grey by Lattafa and Gris Charnel by BDK open with a very smooth, powdery, and slightly creamy iris with some sandalwood in the base. Out of most of the fragrances on this list today, this is one that utilizes iris the most, so this is an iris dominant fragrance. So not all the ones on this list are only iris fragrances, they just utilize either that iris or Orris in the note breakdown. Liam Grey is a very sophisticated iris fragrance, but it leans a little bit soapy to my skin, and that's my least favorite rendition of irises. So when irises go a little bit soapy on my skin, I don't like that. It's still a very good fragrance though. It's very mass appealing. I know the original has a lot of good reviews, so if you want the original for a fraction of the price, then check out Lattafa's Liam Grey. Next up on the list from the house of Al Wataniya is Kion Classic. Kion Classic is extremely similar to the 2011 formulation of Dior Homme Intense. I think that this is the greatest dupe of all time. Not only in terms of how accurate it gets, but also in terms of the scent itself. If you haven't smelled the 2011 formulation of Dior Homme Intense, but you've smelled the current formulation of Dior Homme Intense, then imagine the current formulation, but a lot deeper, richer, and more complex. The mixture between iris and Brett, and maybe a touch of leather in here, is so sophisticated and so luxurious that I don't think you should ever get the original. If you like Dior Homme Intense, or if you want to smell the original formulation, then check out Kion Classic. Let's move on to the designer fragrances that utilize Iris or Orris, and let's start off with a very classic one, Prada L'Homme EDT. There's not a drop left in this. This is a classy, clean, and elegant iris scent. However, it is a very soapy scent. So one of the reasons why I've used so much of this is just because I had it many years ago, so I went through a lot of it. But now I don't love the scent profile. I still love Orris. I still think it's a very classy, masculine scent. It's a little bit too soapy for my liking. But this is a very nice starting Orris scent. Prada L'Homme EDT, if you haven't heard of it, check it out. If you like Prada L'Homme, but you want a little bit of an upgrade, then get Prada L'Homme Intense. So this one keeps the same DNA, but takes out a little bit of that soapiness, which I don't like in the original. I haven't heard anyone say this for this fragrance, but the opening smells like a mixture between iris and blueberry muffins to me. It's a really beautiful opening, but when the dry down shines, it becomes even better. This is versatile enough to where you can pull it off in any occasion, in any weather in my opinion, but I think it does shine in the office. If you like the original Prada L'Homme, but you want a more sophisticated version, then check out Prada L'Homme Intense. Next up, the greatest Valentino fragrance ever created, Valentino Uomo Intense. The second this fragrance begins to unravel, you're hit with a very heavy dose of leather and iris. There's an earthy chocolatiness coming from the patchouli in the base. For me, at least for the first 30 minutes of the fragrance's lifespan, I get this really heavy, rooty carrotiness that is a little bit off-putting. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know that I've grown to like that, but it's taken me a while. So if you're one person that gets the scent of carrots off of Iris or Orris, then you might want to be a little bit careful about this. Out of all the fragrances that I've talked about so far, and all the other ones that are coming up on this list, this is the most sophisticated and the most masculine. If that sounds great to you, check out Valentino's Uomo Intense. Iris, whiskey, and chestnut. If that sounds great to you, then check out Givenchy's Gentleman Reserve Privé. If you guys know me, this was an instant love the second I smelled it. It's this very heavy, boozy iris and woody fragrance. The opening of Givenchy Gentleman Reserve Privé smells like if you're eating a waxy chocolate with a cup of whiskey right next to it. In Givenchy Gentleman Reserve Privé, the iris almost transforms into this very chocolatey iris, and not in the way that Valentino Uomo Intense's patchouli note does that, although this does have a little bit of a chocolatiness, but the iris in this one smells almost like chocolate butter or cocoa butter. A buttery, creamy chocolate with a smooth whiskey and a very woody dry down. If that sounds good to you, then check out Givenchy Gentleman Reserve Privé. Alright, we are done with our dupes and our designers, so now let's get to the niche category, and we will start with imaginary authors, Oh Unknown. Oh Unknown is the most Orris dominant fragrance I've ever smelled in my entire life. In fact, one of the notes in here is Orris butter. Oh Unknown also utilizes this very dry black tea note, and the contrast between the Orris butter and the black tea is blended beautifully and makes this into a very dry and chalky fragrance. My best way to describe this fragrance for someone that hasn't smelled it is if you take white chalk and smash it up in your hands and then you smell that. That's very accurate to what this smells like, and that's not going to appeal to a lot of people. However, this is one of my favorite fragrances in my collection, so if you love Orris butter or if you love the description I gave you, then check out Imaginary Author's Oh Unknown. Another fragrance that utilizes the combination of Orris and boozy notes is in Amouage's Opus 5 Wood Symphony. Let's go back for a second to Givenchy's Gentleman Reserve Privé. So these open with almost a similar note breakdown on paper, however they smell incredibly different. The Givenchy fragrance opens with a whiskey and iris, while the Amouage fragrance opens with a rum and orris. So they sound similar on paper. What are the differences? Reserve Privé utilizes a much sweeter and chocolatier version of iris, while the whiskey note kind of supports it. However, Amouage's Wood Symphony is the driest orris fragrance I've ever smelled in my life, right besides Oh Unknown by Imaginary Authors. I described Oh Unknown as crushed up chalk, and I would describe Wood Symphony as an old library. If you've ever opened an old book and smelled the page, this is very similar to what it smells like. The orris is so dry, and the rum note in here almost takes away your breath. Smelling both Oh Unknown and Wood Symphony gives you a similar feeling of trying to breathe in extremely humid weather where it almost takes your breath away or it feels like you can't breathe as well. So both of these are so dry that they give you a similar orris feeling. One main difference between iris and orris is that iris typically leans sweeter, a little bit more floral, while orris is dry, chalky, and smooth and tends to work better in the base of the fragrance instead of the top notes of the fragrance. We're down to our last two iris and orris fragrances from the niche category, and these are taking a very different turn. So far, all of these fragrances have followed a similar pattern, whether it's iris and booze, iris and leather, a soapier iris, or very dry orris. But these next two are much sweeter fragrances, and the iris may be a little bit harder to detect in these fragrances. Let's start off with Xerjoff's Shuncoin. Shuncoin by Xerjoff is a very unique scent profile. It is an extremely powdery cherry fragrance that tends to be too sweet for most people. However, the orris root in Shuncoin is blended extremely well. That Shuncoin is able to be a very sweet fragrance, while the orris root kind of tames it down and doesn't let it get to the sweetness as something like Jean Paul Gaultier's Le Mal Elixir, which is very cloying. What the orris does in Shuncoin is that it makes it very powdery and very smooth and dry in the base, while the rest of the fragrance still shines more than the orris. This is the first one that is not orris or iris dominant and just utilizes the note of orris in it. I'm kind of using this as an example to show that you do not need to have an overpowering iris or orris in your fragrance for it to still work extremely well. This is Xerjoff's Shuncoin. Last but not least, we have a very interesting combination. Orris root, oud, and rose. This is Montal's Red Oud. None of these fragrances on the list are basic whatsoever, but I can guarantee that you have not smelled anything like Montal's Red Oud. I'll try to explain it in words, but I'm telling you, there's nothing I can do to explain it. You really need to sample this yourself and see how you feel about it. Red Oud opens with this pungent, jammy rose. It's bright, uplifting, deep, and rich. Right as that rose note is rising up, orris butter and black pepper go right below it to support the fragrance. This creates one of the most unique scents that I've ever smelled. Although orris is listed instead of orris butter, the orris note utilized in Red Oud is extremely similar to the orris note utilized in Oh Unknown, which does utilize orris butter. A couple minutes after the fragrance begins to dry down, this very light but beautiful oud starts to come out from the base and completes its fragrance. The oud is not animalic, it's not pungent, and it's not sharp. It's blended beautifully. You really need to smell this for yourself if you like rose and if you like orris root. Check out Montal's Red Oud. Orris and iris fragrances are my favorite category in perfumery, so choosing one of these to be my favorite is nearly impossible. If I were forced to give a top 3 in this category, I don't think I could pick. Just for you guys, I'm really going to try. The only fragrances I would not give above a 9.7 are Prada L'Homme Intense. It's a great fragrance, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a little bit too soapy. Prada L'Homme EDT, this is a way too soapy on my skin, but also a very nice fragrance. And then Liam Gray, which is just not my style of fragrance. Everything else on this list genuinely gets a 9.7 or above because that's how much I love them. If I had to rank the fragrances, I think right now I would put in the number 3 spot Amouage's Wood Symphony. This took me a while to understand, so very dry, papery orris with a very nice rum note, a touch of animalics in the base coming from oud and civet, and a very light rose and jasmine to balance everything out. So number 3, Amouage's Wood Symphony. Number 2, I would have to give it to Mental's Red Oud. This thing is incredible. I just went into detail about the fragrance, so I won't go too much more into detail. But if you want a very good mixture of Orris Butter and Jamie Rose, then you need to check out Mental's Red Oud. And my number 1 Orris and Iris fragrance of all time that I've smelled, of course, I'm sure there are some that I might love even more, is Imaginary Authors Oh Unknown. This just got discontinued, guys. It's so unfortunate. I really love this fragrance, but a lot of people do not like this fragrance. Dry chalk and dry tea is exactly what this is. I don't know why I like it so much, but it appeals to me incredibly well. I'm really intrigued by it, and every time I wear it, I keep going back to smell it. So although 7 of these fragrances I would give above a 9.7, this is my favorite Orris fragrance I've ever smelled in my entire life. Imaginary Authors Oh Unknown.